Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman. We have Real Team Rider Brett Barley with us.
What's up, y'all?
And we are here in Season 2 of Under the Glass, presented by Real and Surfline. And we are on board number 2, which is the Christenson Lane Splitter. Brett, why don't you just open up your emotional chamber on this board and share what you like about this board.
So back when I was a little kid. No. I've had this board probably the longest out of any of the Under the Glass boards.
Okay.
And I would say when we started talking Under the Glass and Trip texted me a lineup of ideas, I was kind of like, I don't know about that one. When he mentioned the Lane Splitter and I looked it up online and I was just like, I have gotten into twin fins in the last few years. Obviously, last Under the Glass, we had a twin fin in it, and I had a lot of fun on that board.
Yep.
But this one is quite different, and I just wasn't quite sure how I would feel about it, but I was down to try it out. And slowly, actually pretty quickly, I would say slowly, but pretty quickly, it went from like, okay, I need to try that board out and see how it goes, to like, holy cow, that board is so fun. Oh, I wish the waves were like smaller for the Lane Splitter. And actually, I've started trying to ride it when it's like overhead and stuff. And this has somehow become like one of the most exciting boards for me to ride because it is so different, but I don't feel limited in that. Like, I've done airs on it. It can do like full nice roundhouses back off the lip. Like it seems like it would be more of a one-dimensional, just like kind of cruisy twin fin. Like I don't ride alternative stuff that much. And I was pretty blown away at like how much I could rip on it and how it just kind of fit in all these things. And again, the way that the tail's designed, it isn't your average board. We'll get into that later. This thing is, quite different. So there is an X factor to it, which for me, when I start trying to ride it in barrels and stuff, is just like a whole nother level of excitement. Cool. This has been like the board I keep talking to people about. They ask me, they see me pull it out of my truck. It looks different than everything else in there. And it's like my most fun board to talk about.
So 2 things that I want to touch on. One is working with you and like kind of feeding you these boards and stuff. Yeah. It's like it's a 2-way learning experience. Like I'm actually learning a lot as well, like through your feedback and then also like through working with someone that's just dedicated thruster.
Yeah.
Like, so you're like, yes,
3
yes,
fins.
yes. And then all of a sudden, no, like I don't want that board. No, that's not me.
It's a quad now. It's a twin.
And, with this board, we also work with a lot of surfers like in the shop, that are looking for boards. And like this one comes up in the conversation and they give like a pretty similar, like, no, like Heisman, like, no, I don't want to talk twin fins.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times twin fins get grouped all into the same category. So like super old school, like big swallowtail, flat, square railed.
Well,
fish,
even if you aren't thinking like that, you're just thinking like it's a twin fin, it's gonna do this.
Yeah, and they think back to a bad twin fin that they had, or they think like a retro like keel fin, twin fin, and but they don't think about like what the potential of like a more performance oriented twin fin is, and that's what the Lane Splitter like is going more towards, is that like kind of more performance twin. I mean, that because you've surfed it, but a lot of the viewers don't, So just touching on that and like, so what's the difference between this and like one of those retro twin fins? Is the nose is narrower, the board itself is more narrow compared to like a retro board. And then also it doesn't have like those big rake back keels, which are awesome for going really fast straight down the line, but not as good for going up the wave. And then also the tail is narrower, obviously.
It's so narrow. It's so narrow and it's so thin.
Yeah, compared to like one of those like kind of keel fins.
It's almost like, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep, it's almost like 2 boards in one to me.
Okay.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, when I look at this, it seems like the fins are set pretty far forward compared to back here. And in comparison to like a lot of twins, I guess maybe you're looking at more twins that like a classic twin would come out here and then come in. But either way, when you hop up here, it feels like a twin. And it gives you just the down the line drive and the cruise and everything. And then when you hop back here, it is like pulling a wild card. It is just such a different feel. Yeah. It gets so loose because your foot's planted back here just over nothing.
Yeah.
And and then everything in between, like there's just all different kinds of feels that you get out of it. I love being able to like hop up, drive down the line, get a ton of speed, lay into a turn, and then as I go to like bank the whitewater, it's wild. It's wild how different it can feel depending on where you're standing. Compared to pretty much like any board I've ridden, twins or thrusters, I would say this gives me like the most like variety of feel in a single board.
So even like that's comparing it to
any board.
To any board that you've had.
Any board.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never had a board that like felt so different from here to here.
So different gears or different gears and different boards?
Different gears, different boards, different, yeah. I don't even know how, I don't know how really to put into words. I like stand here and just I'm riding, and then I go to like do a turn and I jump back here. I'm like, oh, that's different.
Okay.
And like sometimes so my one thing is it takes a little getting used to in that it's two different, it's like almost two different feels. Because if you are like twin fin mindset up here and then you step back here, you're just like, what am I doing? And so the thing that I've learned is that if I don't ride this for a couple weeks or a couple months or something, depending on the waves, and then I get back on it, it takes me like 4 to 6 waves to be like, oh yeah. And then it just is like fluid. I don't even have to think. It just goes back to like muscle memory and how to ride it. But this has been like the most fun I've had riding a board, because I don't feel like I hop on it and I'm gonna just like be doing the same old thing. There's like just all different kinds of X factors going on and what I can like do on a wave and the way it feels. And yeah, from literally knee high to, I think I've caught like a couple overhead waves, but in the like knee to like chest to shoulder high range, like so much fun. Okay. So much fun. I'm just rambling. I can't like I said, this is my most favorite board to talk about. So
let's talk about like how you sized yours. So what's your height and weight?
So I'm 5'9", 163 to 165 pounds, except between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And this is a 5'4" by 19 3/8 by 2 3/8. And I think online there's volume for it, but on here there's not.
But yeah, it's kind of rare he writes it down.
So I went with the 5'4" because it was a little smaller, and I wanted to get this board and be able to like get weird with it is the best way to put it. I didn't want, like if I was just gonna hop on it to cruise, I would have gone with I think the 5'6". Maybe this is the next step up.
Next one up.
I would have gone 5'6", because volume-wise, dimensionally, it just was like, that sounds like a really fun board to just go have a good time on it and cruise. For me, I was like trying to see what I could do.
How small you can ride it.
Yeah, and like what I could push.
Yep.
I didn't want to get on it and, you know, feel like it was too big. Because when you have a board that's a little too big, if your goal is to just, you know, cruise down the line, do a couple like slow cutties and stuff, that's perfect, because it's easier to paddle. It's just better overall experience. But for me, I wanted something that was like, oh, let's see if I can make this kind of high performance. And so I did. And I'm so glad that I went with the 5'4" for me. I would recommend to like the average surfer, you'd probably, you know, if you're my height and weight, you'd want to go 5'6".
5'6", yeah.
Because this can feel small to me paddling.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is the way that the volume's all laid out, it's, like I said, the tail's so tiny and thin, it's like literally all here. So for being a 5'4", the thing glides paddling. But yeah, so that's why I ended up going with the 5'4". I was a little nervous I would regret it size-wise. And then as soon as I started riding it, I was really glad.
So like catching waves, paddling.
I don't have a problem catching waves.
Is it about the same as like your 5'10" shortboards?
Yeah, it's like in the same realm. It might feel a hair smaller.
Okay.
Just lengthwise, because like, you know, at a certain point when you're that much taller than a board, it's like where you need to lay on it for it to paddle, the nose might start like going under or whatever. And so then you got to balance different. It might actually, maybe it paddles better than my shortboards. I don't know. I haven't even like thought of comparing that until now. I've definitely never felt like, oh, I can't catch this wave.
Yeah.
And I've ridden some like kind of below sea level or very below sea level waves on it. One of the first sessions I'd had on it, it might have been the first or the second session. It was literally like from like this big to this big, on shore, doubled up, like gnarly. It couldn't have been more than like knee deep. Like it was so shallow. And so I rode this just to like kind of mess around. Like it was like gray and ugly out. We're just, you know, I got it with Jeffrey to shoot and ended up getting some like good waves. But I had a couple nice wipeouts too, but I never had a moment where I felt like I couldn't catch the wave. So just to kind of give you the long answer, because that's what I do.
So You touched on the glide of the board, and that's something that I notice about all of Chris's boards, like in the ones that I have in my quiver. Actually, I have a lane splitter in my quiver as well, but all of his boards seem to have good glide. Like even when you get into something like this, which you're not even really expecting much glide, it has more glide, like, and more carry, like through flat sections.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, when you start hopping, you can actually see the little pressure dent right there. When you start hopping up here, and like I'll scoot up on the board a little bit to pump. I mean, I literally last winter at the lighthouse just had some days. The days where there was, no one around, and I just went surfing and no one was filming, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
Caught some long knee-high waves because the thing would just fly, like as you just like got in the right spot and just started, kind of wiggling it up and down the face. The thing was just tacking so good for a small board. I was blown away. Like I wouldn't think a board this small would work good in small waves.
In small waves, yeah. So that touches on the glide. The other thing that a lot of his boards do well in is like kind of like uneven like surface, so like whether it's like wind or like kind of chop and stuff. How did this thing handle like kind of inconsistency in the
I didn't notice any. I wouldn't say I noticed any like, oh, this only works if it's like clean or if it's soft or lined up. Like I said, I rode this in a pretty wide variety of waves, from like small and clean and playful to just onshore chunky doubled up, like literally 3 waves in one, to grinding below, like backside barrels that were really fast. Is so fast. So I was like, had this south swell, and it's definitely a challenge because there's not much rocker there. So when you start and it's pretty short. So when you get in a really steep wave and the curve starts getting tight, keeping the nose up can be a challenge. But for me, that was really fun, and I could not believe I expected to fall on way more waves, and I actually made a lot. And then when I'd come out, I was able to connect to the next section because it was going so fast. And then I've ridden it in like, shoulder to head high, like wedging lefts, big turns and stuff. I've literally ridden into everything. And I haven't had a session where I was like, oh, that wasn't fun, or like, oh, I should have rode a different. I've never thought I should have rode a different board. I've had fun on it every single time.
And so you talked about like the lower range being like knee high, like for a good surfer, and like kind of upper range is head.
I mean, I haven't found it yet. I'm searching.
I know a lot of
I'm kind of determined to see what the upper range is.
Right.
Because the last time I rode it, there was like a couple overhead sets, and I had one. I didn't make the wave. It ended up like kind of getting bad, but I had 1 or 2 where took off on like an overhead wave late in the lip, like airdrop, and then the thing was going so fast, like scary fast. Once I like pumped and got up on the face and gave it one more pump, and I was like, I mean, I could make like a really deep barrel right now if it was a good wave. So I'm excited. I really do want to try it in that. It's hard for me though, because like we obviously don't get like that good of waves that often. So, you want to hop on something and you trust. But I haven't really found the upper range. I would say though, like for the average surfer, you're not wanting to ride it in something that's steep and hollow, because like I said, when you start jumping on the back of the tail there, on like a late drop, it is different feeling. And if you don't know how to navigate that, it's gonna be hard. But for anything that's just like, I mean, I don't see why you couldn't ride it in bigger surf. You just, a little bit slopier face or something.
And so I think it was over the summer you went on a trip with O'Neill.
Yep.
To Peru.
Yeah.
And got a little bit skunked as far as like what you guys were ultimately looking for.
What the forecast said and what we got were
what you got in reality.
Different things.
But you had this board with you, right?
Yeah, I did. And that was because, it was the land of the lefts. Like, I'd never been to Peru. I was really excited. And I did know we were supposed to get some small days at the end of the trip. Little did we know they would all be small. So I'm so glad I had it, because we ended up on this little left that was just a machine. And it was only, like thigh to stomach high with some like chest high sets. And I had so much fun, like just being able to like up in the pocket, turn, slide the tail, up in the pocket, turn, slide the tail. Like, I was really surprised at how I could carve this in such a tight pocket and then get speed back out of the bottom turn. Like I would say most like the way my brain would work, I would assume that if I went that hard in a turn that small, I would lose a lot of speed, and maybe like the one turn would look good, but then I'd have to kind of play catch up. And this thing was just like S-turning through the whole wave. Like, it's like this big and just going, doing 4 or 5 turns.
So basically a trip saver.
Oh, it was a trip saver. If I'd have shown up with just short boards, I'd have been really bummed.
Let's touch on, we kind of started talking about the fins a little bit, but let's go back to the fins. Chris recommends on this board like his like more vertical fin template as opposed to like more of like a modern keel or like a fully raked out keel. So like more of like, I guess a lot of people call it like an MR style, like a Mark Richards style twin, like kind of more vertical style, or kind of like a bigger version of like your forward fins and a thruster. You went with the Futures Aquila,
which I just had in my truck.
Twins, right?
I've ridden these in pretty much most of my twins, except for I think the AJW last year I had keels in that one.
Yep.
And I've really loved these fins, in all twins that I've had.
Okay.
I would definitely be curious to try out some others, but I haven't noticed any, hindrances with them. I think they feel great.
Yeah, and so
like for me, it's one of those things where when I've ridden it, there hasn't been like I wonder if there's something I could tweak. It's just like it's going. So
the feedback that we've been getting is like this fin works on it. Like obviously the Christenson version of this fin works on it. If it's a bigger surfer like 190 or bigger, then those people start considering, or if it's like somebody your size that just rides like way bigger fins than you would think, like a Matt Keenan or something who rides like he's smaller than you but rides a large.
Right.
Like those heavy-footed surfers are going like a size up, but with the same fin. So they're riding like in Futures they'd be riding like an EN fin, or in the FCS they would ride like a power twin, just to lock it in a little bit more. We talked about like performance, dimensions, fins. Let's talk about accessibility. Like we always kind of touch on like who could ride this?
Anyone. I mean, I think. Yeah. I mean, okay, if you're a beginner, early beginner, whatever, just like figuring out what boards to get, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because, like I said, when you step back on it, you got an X factor there, and so. But I would say anyone like intermediate and up, you're good to go because I've just had so much fun on this. But it as different as it can be in here, it still is forgiving. And like if you're just looking for like kind of a point break or a longer wave, just cruisy, like I said, when you're stepped up just a hair, the thing just tacks and glides. It's only back here where you start getting like, whoa, what's that? What's going on? What do I have to do to make in that kind of section? And so, but I would say as long as you're an intermediate, like you're gonna have a lot of fun on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll vouch for the accessibility. Like, I mean, for my own of it, because I'm nowhere near your level. And it's like that thing when you take off on a wave, like it literally feels like you got shot out of a cannon. Like just like how fast you're going.
It's so fast right away.
Yeah, and you have extra speed and like which is never going to hurt you.
Yeah.
On most waves, and it just seemed to have like that, like what you're talking about, like that spark or that X factor. Like very first session you ride it, you're like, whoa, like this is a completely different feel, and just the range of the thing and like what you can do with it, like it's definitely an eye opener.
I think that's been the one thing is like the sessions I've had where I'm like trying to do big roundhouses and cutbacks and stuff. Sometimes I feel like maybe when I'm riding it, I'm like, oh, I kind of like went through that one slow, or maybe I kind of bogged a little bit. And then I see the clips, I'm like, wow, it's just like it goes so clean through the water. Sections and waves where like on a short board or something where it's a little softer and I would have bogged, or like would have, gone to bank the whitewater and maybe like just mistimed or whatever. This thing just, I don't know how to explain it or why, but it just goes kind of where you want it to go. So much more surprising than I would have never expected. I would have expected this to be so much more one-dimensional than it is.
Awesome. Well, Brett, thank you so much for sharing your experience on the Christenson Lane Splitter. If anyone out there has any questions on the Lane Splitter or would like to order one stock or custom, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.
You're not getting this one back.